this today's session, and thanks a lot for taking today's time and joining this particular session. As before has already introduced it, our session will be mainly based on multi-node orchestrator installation and HA module. Right. So as he has already introduced it, I am Pawan Rathore. I'm a technical account manager with UiPath, and along with me, Shresh Rishodkar will be introducing on the orchestrator installation part. So guys, if you have not already join the Slido, you can go ahead, scan the barcode and join in the Slido from your mobile devices, wherein you will be able to ask your questions, queries, doubts, whatever you feel like asking about today's session. We will be gladly able to help you across try to answer your queries as best as we can. So this is the third phase of our entire infra series. The first one was orchestrated deployment and architecture, wherein Ankit gave the entire possible scenarios and the walk around about the architecture of UiPath product family. The second one was Orchestrator Live installation. Now, this was a single node orchestrator installation uh, on Azure Cloud as in PaaS service and on-prem as well. Now, the issues with the single node orchestrator where if it goes down, the entire line of business is impacted. There is a high impact compliance issues. So hence, we needed a more feasible, workable solutions for the deployment, right? Hence, we have moved on to multi-node design, which is far more resilient and is will not have that much impact because one node goes down, you will have the other environment working seamlessly without any issues or concerns. The line of business will not be impacted. So today's agenda for the call, I will go ahead and try to outline it. First of all, we will be starting with UiPath Orchestrator multi-node architecture overview and the possible options, the components involved in it. Secondly, we'll be talking about HA add-on that has been provided as in part of product family of UiPath. And we will be discussing account around the master slave architecture of the same, wherein we will go ahead, try to install 3 nodes of HA add-on on the Linux machines. One of them will be acting as a master and 2 nodes will be acting as in slave. So this will be a master slave architecture design with 3 nodes completing the cluster, and these 3 nodes will be serving the orchestrator to synchronously work around all of the nodes and to synchronize data around all the nodes that are present in the cluster. So it's not mandatorily we will be having 2 nodes in a cluster of orchestrator. You can have n number of nodes, and HA add-on is responsible to synchronize the data across all these nodes. So once the installation of this complete cluster is done, we will be doing this live on this session. I will be walking you through the UI portal of HA add-on, a short walkthrough, what are the settings available, how you can go ahead and navigate through the various options. Once that is done, we will be moving on to the orchestrator installation. We will be doing an installation of a primary node of an orchestrator on a IIS server machine, Windows based. Uh, Based on this primary node, we will be able to generate the parameter file from that, which will be used in the secondary node installation that again will be on a Windows Server machine IIS platform. So we will be installing 2 nodes of Orchestrator on IIS on-prem on Windows Server. This will be coupled with 3 nodes, a cluster of HA add-on that has been provided by UiPath. Then we will move on to the post-installation checks. Once the cluster and the HA add-on installation is complete, we will go ahead, validate the environment, how the failover scenarios work. We will walk around that and you can ask your question and answers, but don't wait until the last. As soon as you have any questions, answers, go ahead on Slido, put in your questions, whatever you feel like, anything, and we will be able to take up those. So moving on to multi-node setup with the disaster recovery. Now, as Arun and Prayas in the previous session have mentioned, right, they have installed a single node of Orchestrator. Now, the problem with that design is, right, when you have impactful line of business, risks taking robots which are performing time redundant tasks and impact is huge. the environment cannot go down. In such scenarios, a single node orchestrator is vulnerable basically because it can go down at any point of time because of maintenance issues, certificate issues, network issues, and other infrastructure issues, right? So if that happens, right, the entire orchestrator node will be down, the entire platform will be down, your robots will not be able to connect to the orchestrator, your users will not be able to use the orchestrator as an application. Further, all the schedules will also fail. Right now, to overcome those kind of scenarios, we do have this multi-node setup design. Right herein, what we will do is we will have a network load balancer basically, which will be sitting on top of n orchestrated number of nodes. So it can be 3, 2, 2, 4, 5, any number of nodes based on the number of robots that you may be having in your environment, right? Say that if you are having 100, 200, 300 robots and you want to scale that up, so you can go ahead and quickly add a node to the existing cluster and you can scale up the current solution to serve the increasing number of the robot needs. Now, we have a load balancer. Robots will be connecting to this particular load balancer FQDN, which will be the front end IP or the FQDN of it. This load balancer will be redirecting the request in a round robin fashion, depending upon the configured rules on the load balancer to the n number of nodes. And these n number of nodes were equivalently be serving the requests that are coming from the clients, studio, robots, anyone who is using it. Now, these n number of nodes of the orchestrator will be synchronized. The data will be synchronized between these nodes using a high availability add-on. That's where high availability add-on is important. The current session data for the robots, for the user, for the studios, everything gets saved into the high availability add-on. High availability add-on is in-memory database, which saves all the details in the memory in form of key value pairs. Right, we will discuss more on high availability add-on in the next chapter. Now, this is very easy to scale up. Hence, like we are proposing this particular solutions across. I will move over to the next slide. What is high availability add-on? So when you have n number of nodes, right? So if you are having only a single high availability add-on, then what is going to happen is if that particular high availability add-on node goes down, right? No matter if you're having 2 nodes of orchestrator, 3 nodes of orchestrator, or 5 nodes of orchestrator, your data will not be synchronized across all these nodes of orchestrator. And if the data is not synchronized, your application, which is orchestrator, is going to start misbehaving. It can be down as well, and which will lead to certain issues. So if you are going for a highly resilient model, it's always advised to have a high availability add-on which will keep the data across the orchestrator nodes synchronized, and the sessions will be persistent. They will not misbehave. They will be very seamless because the data synchronization is taken care by HA nodes, which itself is in a cluster. Now, it also has these benefits since it is in a cluster, right? If one node goes down, another node can behave as in cluster, as in master, and serve the request of the existing orchestrator nodes. This is done by HA add-ons like Gossip protocol, and it has watchdogs basically. So if you see HA node 1, HA node 2, HA node 3, on all these nodes, watchdogs will be running and they communicate to each other by a gossip protocol. They continuously keep on gossiping to each other basically, and they get an acknowledgement which gives them the status whether the node is alive or it is responding well or it is behaving well. This keeps in check. In case the gossip protocol does not get any acknowledgement, the watchdogs will assume that particular node is down and it is not able to serve any further upcoming request. So what it will do is it will elect a new master if the master is down. If not the master is down, it will simply isolate that particular slave node from the existing cluster and continue serving the orchestrator needs, data synchronization needs based on the 2 nodes. If even if both nodes are down, it can serve as a single as well. Moving on to next. Now the HA add-on is basically installed on a Linux environment. We do support Red Hat multiple versions. The complete list of the software and hardware requirements for HA add-on could be found in our documentation, which could be easily navigated. You can get all the required details there, right? On the installation steps, which we will be using in this particular session, the commands that we will be using in particular session, and the design, everything is included in these talks, right? So there will be nothing which will be using apart from these talks. We will completely be using inherently these commands only. So in future, if you feel the need, you can go ahead, follow these documentations across, and we will be good to go. So with these slides, right, not much further ado, I will quickly jump on to the uh, installation of an HA add-on. So first we will be doing the installation of an HA add-on, and then we will be performing the installation of Orchestrator single node. Then secondary node will be installed and via load balancer, and then we can see the failover scenarios. So in order to install uh, HA add-on, right? So we do have HA add-on scripts at our repository that needs to be downloaded onto the Linux machines. And here will be, for the demo purpose, we will be using 3 Linux machines. This is node 1, right? And node 2, node 3. So we have 3 nodes on which we will be installing the HA add-on. So these are Linux machine. I will tell you a bit about the Linux machines. So once the Linux machine is created, right, you will get an IP address and you can SSH into these machines on port 42 using the given credentials while you are making the machine. You can give the credentials, or if your IT team has made the machines for you, they will be giving you certain credentials. This is the default port 22 on which you can connect to these machines, right? I have already connected to this machine in the interest of time. For the installation on these machines, we will need sudo privileges or the root user access. Without these, it will not be possible. First, the other thing that we need to ensure is on these machines should be able to interact to each other. Basically, the communication should be there, and there is set of firewall rules for ports that needs to be opened as well, which could be found in our documentation. These machines should also have the connectivity to the orchestrator machines, because orchestrator, we will be configuring the cluster URL in the orchestrator machines. And if there is no connectivity, it is gonna break. So with that, I'm gonna start off. So I will try to go to the sudo user. So sudo is like kind of a super user rule in the Linux environment, and you can go ahead with that. Once you are there, I'm going to create a directory. So make dir. This command is used to create a folder basically in the Linux environment. And I will say that live community session. In this in this folder, we will be installing all our downloading all our scripts and perform the installation. So I will open this directory. Now, we are inside a directory. Now, what we need is we need to download the script files from UiPath repository. Uh, we have hosted this repository at download.uipath.com. From the Linux environment, we do need a network downloader to get those files for us. In case the Linux environment machines are inside a air-gapped scenario, so what you need to do is you need to go ahead, download those scripts from the repository, put it into a different machine, and then you can go ahead and copy paste into these Linux environments. So there is a utility in the Linux environment, wget, which acts as a network downloader and will be able to download the scripts from the UiPath repository. So I'm going to install that package, install yum install, and wget is the utility. This is the utility I want to install. It will go ahead and start executing. If the utility is present already installed, then it will do nothing. But in case your accessing the Linux environment first time, this utility will not be present and you may need to install it across. So once this is installed, you can go ahead and try to pull the HA add-on scripts from our repository. So I will do a wget and then HTTPS. This is our repository. I will just expand this. So this is our online repository from where we will be able to download other files across. Now this file is downloaded. If I do an ls, which means I need to see the content using ls, I need to see the contents of this particular directory. If I open, you see we have this particular file which we just downloaded from the UiPath repository. And if you observe carefully, it's in white color, which means it does not have the execute permissions yet. You will not be able to run this across. So we need to change the permissions. Cmod is a command in Linux which changes the permissions given on a particular file. So cmod x a plus x. A is for users and x is for execute permissions. Since this is a script, I'm going to change the permissions on this particular script file to all the users and I will give it an execute permissions. So I need to give the file name now on which I need to give these permissions. If I hit enter and if you now do a list, basically see the contents of a folder, you will get to see this has turned green, which means now we do have execute permissions on this particular folder. Once we do have execute permissions on this particular folder, we are good to go and run these scripts. So dot get dot is referred as to the current directory sh. Now, when we run this script, it is going to perform the entire installation of an HA node. It will completely install HA add-on on this node. So I will execute this and I will give some additional parameters. One is -u. -u is the user which will be accessing the HA add-on UI and for administrative purposes, right? So we can give any user as of now, CO community. I would say that uipath.com. This will be my user and I need to define the password as well for this particular user. I would say that admin123 maybe, right? So these two things and we need to accept the license agreement. That's it. It's pretty simple. You just run this command and it will start the installation. Now what it is doing it from the SH files, it is gonna decompress it and extract all the relevant scripts across and try to perform the installation. So while this installation is being performed, let me move to the other node as well. So this is my node 2. I have already connected to these server machines and this is my node 2. I will go ahead and perform kind of similar steps on this node as well. So again, I need to be a sudo have the sudo access, which is administrative privileges, similar to Windows. Once I have that, I will make a di directory, so that live session. I will get into the directory by cd. Cd is used to open that particular directory. I'm in there. Again, this is not to a completely a different machine altogether. You can go ahead and install the same utility, which is wget, because you will need to get the sh and installation files from the UiPath repository to perform the installation on the second node as well. So I will go ahead and install wget. If it is already installed, it will do nothing and it will come out. Once this is done, we can go ahead and get the HA add-on required files on node 2 using the same path. Download.uipath.com HA and then get -ha.sh. This will download the files in this environment, it's downloaded. So if you observe, we have just given the parameters in the node 1 for the master. We have not given any parameter apart from the user details that will be accessing the environment. So I will wait for this installation to complete. I have completed the prereqs. I have kept the downloaded files in the node 2. We can do the same thing for node 3 as well. So again, we need sudo privileges on this machine as well. And then I'm gonna make another directory live session, then cd cd unity session. Again, like we need to install the same package to get the installables. Wget. If it is installed already, it is gonna do nothing. If not, fine. So I will try to get the package here as well. So http as colon download.uipath.com, wherein you get the HA module and you get the HA script.sh. That's it, and it will download that particular script in this environment. Now, while we were downloading the prerequisite, if you have observed, the installation of our HA add-on on the master node has been completed. You see, this is installation and configuration of high availability add-on on node 1 has been completed successfully. And if we try to observe any of the errors, no, we did not got any of the errors. So it seems like the installation was successful without any failures, right? Now we can go ahead and install this node 1 will be acting our master, and we can go ahead and install HA add-on on node 2. So since there is already a master, I would like to keep my node 2 as an slave node, right? And it should join to a particular cluster, which is having a master. Right now, I only have a one master, so I intend to join my node 2, which is a slave node, to my node 1. Now, how we can do that is we will go ahead with the installation and joining of the clusters simultaneously. So if I do an ls, okay, so if you see, we did not give the permission, execute permissions to this file. We will give the execute permissions to this particular file using chmod. Again, A is for users and X is for execute permissions on which file? Get file. Get hyphen fine. So again, you do an ls and you will find this is turned to green. I will expand this so that it is visible far more clearly. Now we can go ahead and join this. So this is the script. As you see, I copied it from the node 1. And if you see, this was my script. I ran this as such a script, gave the username, which was community user, and the admin password, and accepted the license. Now, since this will be my slave node, I'm going to join this. I'm going to join this particular node to my node 1. This is node 2. I'm going to wish the slave node to be joining to node 1. And for that, I'm going to use a parameter which is -j, which is for join. And then I'm going to give the IP address of the machine where it needs to join in. So what this is going to do is it is going to make an API HTTP call to the node 1 and say that I wish to join as a slave node, and this node will be attached to that particular cluster. Hence, it is very much required right before you go ahead and begin with the installation, ensure the connectivity between all the three nodes is okay and it does not breaks. I will go ahead and start the installation. Now, we cannot install other two nodes until the master is up, but we can definitely go ahead since master is up, and we can definitely go ahead and install the same on node 3 because it will be joining to the same master node of the same cluster. So I'm going to repeat the same command here. Before that, we did downloaded the file here and it does not have the execute permissions. So we will go ahead and provide the execute permissions a users plus access for execute and on file get sh. If you do an ls again, which means see the contents, yeah, it is turned green. Now we can go ahead and execute the command. Again, -j is for joining and which master node? It's the 6, which is node 1. I will go ahead, enter it across. So meanwhile, this installs and node 2 is also installing and joining the cluster. Let me take you to the UI. So we did perform complete installation on 10.0.6 on 8443. Let me try to access it across. So our username was the community user that we provided with the -u parameter. And then the password was which we gave with the -p parameter as a password. Now we are into the UI and this is the installation for HA add-on we just performed. This is the home pane of it. If you go to the nodes, you will see there is only one node because still my node 2, which is acting as a slave, and node 3, which is acting as a slave, both are trying to get installed and trying to be joining the cluster. Right. So meanwhile, the installation goes on. Let me walk you through the through the UI. If you go ahead and see, this is my UiPath.cluster. It is by default built in. You can see the key matrices here in the UI, the resources that are being used, and the operations per second, the RAM that is being used, the disk utilization that been used, and the CPU, the traffic, the connection. This will give you provide you all the matrices on this current server, what is going on. Then if we move to the configurations part of it, you can see the basic information here, the RAM that is being used, the storage that has been used, on which environment the HA add-on is installed, and what is, see, HA add-on has inbuilt Redis. So you can see the version and all in the configurations section. Next, I'm gonna move to C. Another node added up. If you observe previously when we navigated to the node section, you saw only node 1. Now node 2 is joined to this particular cluster and node 3 is joining. It has the installation has completed, but yes, the joining of this particular node is pending and which will be taking place. Let me quickly navigate to the node 2. If you see, the installation of HA add-on has been finished and this node was successfully joined to this particular cluster, which we can see from the UI as well. Now, this is trying to join it across. It seems like it has also joined and the installation on this one has also been completed. If I go back to the UI and now you can see my all the three nodes are up and running and are part of the cluster and are part of the cluster. So if you go to any one of these nodes, you will be able to see. So this is node 1, 10.06, 10.07 is my node 2, and 10.08 is my node 3. These are behaving as a part of the cluster. Now you can go to database. While the installation HA add-on by default does create a UiPath orchestrated database, which is in memory and saves all the data as a key value pair. Again, all the events and the logs you can see in the logging section. It will log everything starting from when a node joins to the cluster or when a node is unhealthy or when the cluster master changes from one node to another node. All the information, the errors that can be seen in the logs as well. If we go ahead to access control, you can go ahead and add users here in this section. You can go to role section as well and provide the adjacent role for the user that has been added in this section. I will go to the settings. Cluster key is the license key. Say that when you first get the HA add-on, you will be getting a license key from UiPath. You can go ahead and paste that license key in the cluster key section to license HA add-on component. The certificates are listed, which will be used for HTTPS communication, and these certificates could be altered using RL admin tools, which I will be showcasing you in a moment. So you can also configure the alert mechanism in HAA add-on. You can provide your SMTP mail server, the username and password, define the security, and then you will be able to go ahead and receive the mails across whatever alerts you want to have. So I'm going to leave this page. You can go ahead and configure the alert that are be desired for, say that node failed, node joined, any types of alerts that you need for the monitoring purposes of this. I will go back again to the cluster itself and I will show you the installation component. So by default, the location is OPT, installation location is Redis Labs and bin. If you go to LS and then you see there are few important tools here. One is RL admin, the another one is RL check, and then another one is supervisor CTL. I will tell you the functions of each of them. Now, RL check is like quick and a easy way to check across how my cluster is performing. It is gonna, okay, bash is not loaded. Let me try to load the bash and then I'm gonna execute the command again. RL check, RL check. So if you see, while RL check will is gonna verify all the services that HA add-on is running, and it is gonna state the status of each of those services across in the UI here and let you know which pointers it has been failing, where it has been passing. So it will make very much easier for you guys to troubleshoot in case of the one of the nodes is down across, right? Now moving on to RL admin section. So RL admin you can use to get the status of all the nodes on how they are performing. Now, if you observe carefully, so this is the output of my RL admin status. You have node 1 and the role of node 1 is master. So this is acting as an master and the health status of it is okay. It is running good without any issues. You go to node 2. This is acting as a slave node. It is serving the master and this is running perfectly fine with which can be validated by a status. The other node is slave 3. This is also running fine, which can be validated via status. The other thing you observe is the star here, which is present besides node 1. Now, this is important because it tells me which is the node that is holding the current in-memory database. So if the star is present in any of the other nodes, which means like that particular node is holding right now my in-memory database, which will be in form of key value pairs across. So let's see what happens across when we try to put this down. Let's put this down. Yeah, as I told, like supervisor CTL, you can go ahead, use this command, and then I'm going to stop all the services of the HA add-on. I go ahead, hit stop. It will take like 2-3 seconds maybe, and then try to stop all the services running on this particular master node. So my master node will be completely down and it will not be running. And if I go back to UI, if you see, and if I go to nodes across, and I'm going to refresh this, let's see. Okay, so since my node 6 is down, I'm going to connect to node 7 because it is not going to serve and all the services are down. Let me come in. If you see the nodes across, you see the node 1, which was master, is completely down and other two are healthy nodes. The same could be validated as well from any of the nodes. Basically, let me try to use node 2 to validate the status of it. So I will go again the installation directory of HA add-on and bin folder. Again, I will use ls to identify whether all the files, all the utilities are present there. I'm going to use rl admin and check the status, what it is. Let's see, bash not found. I'm going to load bash and then RL admin status. Now you see my node 1 is down, and the status clearly says that the node 1 is down and it has been down since 1 minute. Last seen. So if you observe, it says last seen, which means, right, the watchdogs running on each of these particular nodes, right, were communicating to all the other nodes via gossip protocol. And since these watchdogs and the gossip protocol communication ended with the node 1, it was not able to receive any acknowledgement. It says that this node is down, and hence the replication took place. All the data was transferred to node 2, and now node 2 is might having the database. If it can be observed from the star, and this node 2, which was previously acting as a slave, now is acting as a master, right? So I'm gonna put this up again. Let's see. So now I'm not gonna stop. I'm gonna start and then all. So again, it is gonna take a couple of seconds and then start all the services corresponding to the HAA module, and the services will be up in a minute. So the services have been started. If I go to the UI and try to validate again the nodes of the cluster, you see the third node is again up and running without any issues. And my entire cluster of 3 nodes with HA add-on is healthy and is in a good condition. You can validate the same here from RL admin status check. Now, since node 1 is up and running and is perfectly fine, that does not mean there is a transfer of responsibilities. So previously node 1 was acting as a master, which went down. The master was elected internally by HAI add-on nodes, and it made node 2 as a master. Again, node 1 is up and running, then it does not transfer its responsibilities of the master to any of the node. It will keep as it as a second node until or unless there is another failure or there is some load or there are certain issues. Only then it is going to transfer, else it is going to be acting as a master only. So these were like few different failover scenarios. Now, if I go back to the UI and if I go ahead to any one of these nodes, this is my database. If I go to configuration, this database will be holding all the automations. This is my endpoint replica, right, of this particular cluster. Now this will be used, this address will be used by Shreyesh in further installation of UiPath multi-node installation. He will be using this address as an in the orchestrator while installation and configuring it again in the configs as well, so that orchestrator can communicate to this particular cluster and keep all the data in sync. So with this, I'm going to provide this particular URL to Shreyash, and he will continue with the installation of orchestrator multi-node on the Windows server. Thank you, guys.
Hey, thanks very much, Pawan, for that fantastic session and live demo of HA cluster installation. Hello, everyone. A warm welcome to all of you for the session. Hope everybody is doing great. I'll pick up from where Pawan has handed over to me. So far in the session, you have seen a demo of how to go about installing the high availability add-on component in this architecture. So I hope everybody can see my screen. Uh, So as explained by Pawan in the architecture overview explanation, in a multi-node scenario, you have different clients trying to access the orchestrator, but as opposed to what you saw in the previous session, last session that was conducted by Arun and Priyesh, we don't access the orchestrator URL directly. Instead, the traffic is routed via a network load balancer. Network load balancer interprets or accepts and acknowledges all the incoming traffic. Then it distributes that traffic depending on the algorithm which is configured. Most probably it is a round robin based algorithm, but it will check all the nodes that are available in its backend pool and all the healthy nodes that it finds in a certain way, it will transfer the traffic evenly to the available healthy nodes. Based on this diagram, you can also see that apart from the load balancer, your HA already is installed and it is having the resiliency. We are going to do a configuration of load balancer in the remaining part of the session. The load balancer is actually already configured, but I will try to walk you all through the configuration of load balancer as to how it was set up, and then we will be using it for our installation. We will be installing Orchestrator. So the nodes that are represented here, 3 nodes. You can have n number of Orchestrator nodes, as Pawan mentioned, but we'll be proceeding with 2. Anything more than 1, we call it as a multi-node scenario. So we'll be going with 2 Orchestrator web server nodes installation, and we will be using a centralized storage to store all our NuGet packages or any kind of storage data that Orchestrator is hosting. And why this is needed, we will discuss that also. Ultimately, we will be using SQL Server resiliency. So it is in a multi-node scenario, it is expected that all the server-side components that are behind the load balancer have some sort of resiliency. When I say resiliency, even if one of the server component node goes down, it should not. It should be replicated on the other available component node so that the entire system doesn't go down. So the same is expected on SQL Server side also. So we recommend the database SQL Server to have always on availability turned on. That will ensure the replication on the database persistent layer side also. And in an event, if your one SQL instance goes down, your entire setup will not crash. Elasticsearch and Kibana is an optional part, so we are skipping that for today's session. But on the database side, just for the sake of simplicity, instead of like setting up a SQL in-house based installation, I have used SQL Azure PaaS service. So I'll be using the Azure SQL PaaS database that will provide a resiliency in itself. For the entire demo that we're going to do today, we are using Azure Cloud as a platform. Similar thing can be done in an on-prem data center-based environment or any of the cloud providers, Azure, AWS, or Google Cloud. But for today's session, we are using Azure Cloud. So with that, let me begin to show by showing you the load balancer configuration. And I will switch to the web window, and I will search for the load balancer configuration in my resource group. So I have already created one load balancer in interest of time. And this is an Azure network load balancer that is configured. Similarly, in an on-prem environment, you can work with your network IT teams to create the load balancer of your choice. So typically in an Azure load balancer setup, Azure will first ask some basic questions like overview, as that you can see in this overview details as to what is the subscription, what is the resource group, what is the region where you want to configure your load balancer. Once these details are provided, then it will allow you to move on with setting up the load balancer, other load balancer configuration and details. So the very first step while setting up the load balancer that will be asked is, what is the front-end IP configuration? So in this step, an IP address gets assigned to the load balancer on which your incoming traffic will come and hit. So when I go ahead and add, so here I've already added it, but once I added this, so my load balancer name is HA community session. I have created a front-end IP configuration called HA community session FE. As soon as I created it, an IP address 20.97.218.32 got assigned to it, and that is the IP address which will be like interpreting all the incoming traffic. Once the front-facing IP is configured, we will configure the backend pool. So what is the meaning of backend pool is, once any incoming request is hitting the load balancer IP, load balancer needs to know where to redirect that request in order to get a response. So in this case, I have already configured a backend pool. And in this backend pool, I have specified 2 virtual machines on which we are going to attempt to install our orchestrator. So here, just to show you, if I click on add button, it asks me to provide a backend pool name. It asks me to specify the virtual network. So all the machines that are available in the virtual network that I selected will become available for me to add into my backend pool. Once I add them to the backend pool, orchestrator will it will tell Orchestrator in a way that these are the machines available in your backend pool, and you can transfer traffic to any of these machines. So when I click on the add button, it shows me all the machines which are available in the backend pool. But as you saw here, there are a total of 5 machines. But since I'm going to install Orchestrator on only these 2 nodes, I have added only the 2 web Orchestrator servers in my backend pool. Once the front-end IP and the backend pool is configured, the next most important step is to configure the load balancing rules. So I will go to the load balancer rules section. And here I've already configured the load balancer rule. So in the load balancer rule, when I click on it, you can see that it asks me to provide a name for the rule. And this rule tells the load balancer what is my front-facing IP, what is my backend pool, what are the nodes that are listening to the load balancer behind the load balancer, and what is the protocol that it is using to pass the traffic to the underlying nodes. So here, in this case, we are using TCP protocol, and we are passing that to port 443. Why we are using port 443 is because we are going to install the orchestrator on the IIS web server, and it will be installed using HTTPS. So by default, it uses 443 protocol. So based on that, we have configured the backend port, and we have also specified a health probe. So now what is health probe is like it it is like a polling mechanism that the load balancer uses to check the machines that we have specified in the backend pool, whether they are in a healthy state or not. So once I configure it, it will ask me to provide one name, meaningful name, and it will ask me to specify a protocol. I've already created and used HTTPS, so it is not showing HTTPS here. But my health probe will use HTTPS protocol to make the connection on port 443. I specified 443 in the probe that I have set, and it will make that polling call at interval of every 5 seconds. So at every 5 seconds, load balancer will do a health check against all the backend nodes on port 443 to check whether the underlying nodes are up or not. Now, in an event, if any machine gets, let's say, rebooted, or the IIS goes down, or your application goes down, it will find that node unhealthy. It will tell the load balancer that, okay, this node is right now not available. So it will redirect the traffic to only the healthy nodes. So there are a few more settings like session persistence, idle timeout, floating IP. These are more detailed settings. You can work with your, I will not go much in detail of that, but you can work with your network IT teams as to what configurations are available. I'm going with the default settings for this. So this, in a way, explains the load balancer configuration that we are going to use for today's setup. After that, the next part that comes is storage server. Now, a question can come that why do we need a centralized storage? So again, as you would have seen in the previous session that we conducted last week, Arun and Priyesh installed the single node orchestrator. When they install the orchestrator on a local machine, wherever your build gets deployed, a folder named storage gets created. For example, let's say we are publishing a NuGet package, automation package. This package will get published locally on the orchestrator web server. Now, the question is, why can't we use the same kind of setup, like local storage setup for a multi-node scenario? The reason for that is, since the load balancer will be directing the traffic in a round robin fashion or randomly to the underlying nodes, let's say your data gets published, it will get published if it is stored locally, it will get published only to one particular node, and other nodes will not be in sync to read or receive that data, or even write to that data, for example. So let's say you published everything and it went on node 1, and for some reason your node 1 went down, your node 2 and node 3 will not have a copy of it. So because of that reason, it is recommended to have a centralized storage. So for a centralized storage scenario, you can either use a file system that is shared and accessible across all your web orchestrator nodes, or you can go for Azure or AWS based storage provider options. For this demo, we are going to use a Azure Blob option that is accessible from all web orchestrator nodes. So let me quickly show you the configuration that I have done for Azure Blob also. So I have created this Azure Blob storage called HA Session Demo Blob, and this has some containers. And right now this container just has one folder, but it doesn't have much packages in it. But if I go to access keys here, I can get the connection string. I have copied this endpoint and I will be using this endpoint, specifying this endpoint in my orchestrator web config to point to this centralized Azure blob storage. So my configuration of load balancer is ready. My configuration of storage server is ready. My high availability add-on is already completed by Pawan and he shared the connection string with me. The last part that I need before I can move to the orchestrator nodes is my database. So as I had mentioned, I'll be using the Azure SQL Pass database. And if I go to the favorites, I have bookmarked the database that I'm going to be using. So this is the SQL Pass database instance that I have created. It is called hasession.database.windows.net, and I'll be using this server name for configuring to this orchestrators. As you can see, right now there are no databases in the SQL server running. So I have all the necessary components ready with me. Now, in a way, from an infra point of view, I have my two orchestrator web nodes and all the components ready. So I can go ahead and attempt my installation. Now, in order to attempt the installation, I'll again refer to the UiPath docs link slide, which Pawan was previously showing. So here we have an example provided in our docs link as to how to go about installing the multi-node orchestrator. So I have already opened that. And there are two specific commands that are provided in the documentation that mention how can I go about installing the multi-node orchestrator. So as you can see here on the window, the command is different for my node 1 installation. And in order to configure the rest of the nodes from node 2 onwards, all subsequent nodes, I have a different command. In the previous session, Arun and Priyesh had shown you how to install the orchestrator using the MSI directly as well as via the command prompt. However, since today we are expecting the installation to be done with these parameters for both the nodes, we are going to use command prompt mode or like PowerShell mode to specify the parameters and do the or trigger the installation. Uh, Again, a question may arise: why do we have different commands for installing orchestrator on node 1 and node 2? So we will talk about that also in detail when we start or attempt the installation. But for now, I have copied these two commands on my two orchestrator nodes. So let me log into the orchestrator now. So as you can see, this is my web orchestrator node 1, and I will quickly show you the configuration of this server right now. So just to test the connectivity from this server, I have installed SSMS, and I can connect to the SQL Pass database that is already installed. So I can log into that through SQL based login. So my connectivity is good over there. If I go to control panel and I will just refresh the add and remove program window, as you can see, the prerequisites of IIS URL rewrite and .NET Core 3.1.27 is already available, and there is no orchestrator installed currently on this server. So the first scenario that we are attempting is both my web server orchestrators are not having anything installed in it, and we are going to install orchestrator first on node 1, and then we will be using that installer to generate a parameter file that will be used for installing node 2. So with that, I have verified the prerequisites. However, one prerequisite is still pending. So if you remember the last session, one of the prerequisites for installation is to have the SSL certificate available and ready. Because when I trigger my installer, it will ask me to provide the SSL certificate thumbprint. Now, when it comes to multi-node based scenario, the SSL certificate requirements are slightly different as compared to single node. So let's take a look at what are those differences. So in order to be, in interest of time, I had already created this certificate and had already placed it on the certificate store. I will open this certificate and show you. So once the certificate is open, I'll go to the details tab. And if I look at the subject alternative name of the certificate, it should contain the following entries. It should contain the fully qualified domain name of the load balancer URL. So if you remember, HAA community session is our load balancer name, and this is the domain name. So fully qualified domain name is specified. And the certificate should also contain the host names of both uh, the underlying VMs, which are behind the load balancer, so that this certificate can be understood by the underlying web server request also. So I have created a self-signed certificate that contains these three um, entries, SAN entry, subject alternative name entries. And this is the thumbprint of the URL, which I'll be using for the installation today. Now, one of the questions that came in previous session was how to go about installing the self-signed certificate. So there are various ways to do that. I'll show you a few examples. One is if I go to IIS and if I go to server certificates, there is an option to install or create self-signed certificate from here. On the right pane under actions, you see this link for create self-signed certificate. It will open a wizard and it will allow you to create certificate that way. Uh, However, if I have to specify subject alternative name, I've used a PowerShell method to generate a self-signed certificate that contains these entries. So I will show you an example of how we can generate it through PowerShell also. For the purpose of installation, I will be going with the certificate that is already available, which matches my load balance FQDN name. So it is HA community session dot the domain name. But just for the demo purpose, I will also show you how we can go about creating a new self-signed certificate. So I've given it a different name. If you observe closely, it is called HA Community Session Demo. And after I create the certificate, I will delete it off to avoid confusion. So let me trigger this command. So while this command is running, and as you can see, I've specified a few parameters. I've specified the SAN name with -DNS name. I've specified the three entries that I want in the SAN name, and I've specified the destination. So the destination is certificate store, and the location is my personal folder under local machine. So this will take maybe a few seconds to run. And while this runs, after it completes, after the command executes, we should see a new certificate getting generated here. While this is generating, let us look again closely at what are these two different installation commands and why are they different. So I have already copied the command from the documentation into the link. Let us understand the parameters that are being passed here. So in order to run this command, first I have to download the installer, similar to how Arun had done in the previous session. I have to navigate to that location and then I can execute it either through PowerShell or command prompt. Since you have already seen command prompt in previous session, we will use PowerShell for today. I've opened PowerShell in admin mode. I will go to the location. I will trigger the installer using the MSI, and I will specify everything after this will tell the MSI what are the parameters for it. So it will, the first parameter here is output parameter file, and there is a value to it. So what this means is all the entries, since this will be an interactive installation where installer will ask me for certain inputs or entries, um, everything that I provide, installer will save all that information, and it will, at the end of the installation, once if the installation succeeds, um, it will generate a JSON file which will contain the inputs provided by the user. Why it does that, I will explain you that also, but I'll come back in a minute to that. Next is Redis configuration string, configuration details. So I am going with the default details which is given in the documentation for a reason that this will enable the Redis in the configuration, but it will enable it with the details that I am providing here. And then we will manually change this to the connection string that Pawan has provided. That will help us understand where this connection string gets stored and how to go about changing that. Similarly, I am also specifying the storage location. So now if you can relate this command to the architecture diagram that we saw, we are specifying all the components that my orchestrator needs to read. So it needs a Redis connection string, it needs a centralized storage location, and during the course of installation, it will ask me for other details like certificate and database, using which it will be able to integrate with all the components. One last point is the quartz cluster. So this is one parameter which is recommended in the documentation, because when we have a multi-node based scenario, in order to trigger the job from different orchestrator nodes, in order to have synchronization between different nodes, it is recommended to keep this parameter as enabled. So you can just keep this as one means enabled and 0 means disabled. So hope this command is clear. Meanwhile, our certificate has also got generated. So based on this, let us check if we have an entry in the certificate store. So as you can see, a new certificate got generated. I've not added this in trusted root yet, so it is giving me this warning. But if I go to the subject alternative name, it has all the node entries and it has its own new distinct thumbprint also. So as I mentioned, this was just for demo. I'll delete this. We don't need this for our installation. We'll be using the correct one, which is matching the load balancer FQDN. So with this, our installation command is also ready. We have verified all the prerequisites. Right now, if I go to IIS and let me just refresh the node, there is no website or any application pool under it right now. So let me go ahead and trigger this installation. So in PowerShell ISE, you can just select this screen and this button will just run the selection. So it is not allowing me because I'm not in the correct build location. So first I need to navigate to the folder where I have the directory. So let me go there. So now I'm in the downloads folder. Let me clear the screen and let me check the contents of this directory. So I can see that when I run dir command, I can see Orchestrator MSI is already present there. So with this, I am good to install, run my installation command since I am in that directory. So as soon as I have run this command, it has triggered the installation. As we saw during the single node session, it will first run the prerequisite checks to ensure that all the required softwares are already installed and available. I will accept the agreement terms, license agreement terms. I'm going to skip insights and test automation suite test suite installation. I don't need that right now. Now it is asking me to provide the SSL certificate details. So it will be the thumbprint that we saw in the certificate store. So I've already copied this in the notepad file. I'll use this. Now it is asking me for identity. Now I am going to proceed with application pool identity. However, one point to note here is, let's say if I would have not used an Azure blob storage, and if I use a shared file system based storage that has sharing enabled across multiple web orchestrator node, you have to ensure that identity user under which you're running your application pool needs to have read and write access to the shared location. So mostly the customers go with a custom service account in that case. But since I'm going to use Azure Blob, I have my own connection string and I have my own users which I'm going to connect that Azure Blob with. I'm going to run my orchestrator under application pool identity. Next is it is asking me for providing the database details. So I will provide the SQL database name, SQL Past database server name, and I'm going to use SQL Server authentication. Okay, so that went fine. Next, it asks me for what is the orchestrator public URL. This URL should be resolvable from the user's browser. So I have enabled my load balancer for public domain traffic. Anyone can access that URL, and I will specify the fully qualified domain name of my load balancer as the orchestrator URL because I don't want anybody to access my orchestrator directly. I want everyone to come only via the load balancer URL. So when they hit the load balancer URL, ultimately they are hitting the front facing IP that we configured while setting up our load balancer. I will also specify the thumbprint and Next details are already present. I am going to skip the Elasticsearch part and I'll just specify the login password, admin login password. I'm good to install. So this installation will take a few minutes. So while the installation continues, we have a small quiz lined up for you. So I would encourage all of you to participate in the quiz. It will become a bit of an interactive session, and let's see who can lead today's quiz. So I'm just bringing up the quiz.
Go to the present mode, Shresh,
Yeah, just a
on the
second.
top. Present in full screen.
Okay.
Oh, that's also fine, but full screen will be much better.
Uh, Let me.
I think you should restart it.
Okay, just a second.
And where are the options to select?
So I can see few folks are able to join the quiz. Let me know once.
Hello, everyone. Please join the quiz. There's a QR code here, and there's a link also pasted in the chat. I'm pasting it again. I should just give them a few more minutes, maybe just a minute or so.
Sure. I see 24 participants right now. Maybe another few seconds, and then we can make a start.
We may have a surprise gift for a winner, so I think it will give us some motivation. So please join and try to answer.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Ankit. So with that, I'll just begin the quiz. First question coming along your way. S- So you have 20 seconds to answer this. Question is, which of the command that you see on the screen is a correct command, like which will perform the action mentioned next to the command? There is only one correct answer to this. Okay, time's up. Seems like a
Okay,
even.
so it seems like C is the right option. So when we executed the get -ha.sh script, right, -u parameter was used to add a particular user which will be acting as an administrator. And -h is just a dummy. -j is used to join the current node to a cluster wherein master is running. And sudo is used to get the administrative privileges. wget is the right utility to get and download the files from the network repository.
So it appears 27% got the answer right.
Yeah.
Let's move to the next question. The command rl admin status will provide what details? If you run this command, as Pawan had shown, which of this information will you be able to retrieve? Time's up.
Yeah,
68%
that's
popular
correct.
answer. And it seems a lot of people are following the session closely, which is good. Okay, next question coming your way is related to multi-node installation part. Which of the following parameter is not mandatory for secondary node installation? Okay, majority of you have answered quartz cluster. Let's see what the correct answer is. And that is the correct answer. So the JSON input parameter file specifying to the installer that secondary node is equal to 1 and passive installation are all mandatory parameter. Quartz cluster, you need to specify only when you're installing node 1. Fourth question, while creating SSL certificate for multi-node setup, which options are correct? You have 25 seconds to answer this because the options are a bit descriptive. 'So majority have answered that should contain the FQDN of the load balancer as well as host name of all the underlying nodes, which is the correct answer. 83% have got it right. Well done. Last question coming your way. Which of the following is true with respect to storage configuration that is needed for a multi-node setup? %65 have answered option B, centralized location should be used. Let's see. And the answer is correct. So everyone has done really well in the quiz. Let's try to check the results. And Jitin KP is the winner, answered all 5 questions correctly. So well done, Jitin.
Hi, Ankit this side. Jitin, if you can share your email ID with us, you will be receiving a goodie from our side.
Okay, that was a good quiz. I'll move and check where are we with the installation. I hope everyone can still see my screen. Right. So the installation has completed on Web Orchestrator Node 1. Let's validate. So I will open IIS and refresh. I can see, first I'll check the application pools. The application pools are already created and my website is also created. However, if I check the bindings, it is still running on localhost. So let me go to bindings. I will edit the bindings. I can see that the certificate is correctly applied, but the host name is not correctly specified. So let me go ahead and ensure that correct host name is given to the website binding. Okay, so binding has got corrected. The certificate is also proper on IIS. Next, I will go and check my configurations. So as if you remember, during the installation, we specified the default value of Redis connection string, not the correct value, and Azure blob storage also. So I will navigate to the orchestrator build location path, which is my UiPath C program files UiPath orchestrator. And here I'll search for my config file. Let me open this in Notepad++. I will search for Redis. So Redis is already enabled here, but if you see, the connection string is the value that we provided during the installation in my installer. So it has picked value from there and applied it over here, this Redis host value. So I need to correct this with the value that Pawan gave me. So I have that copied over. I'll specify the other two nodes also. And I will also take this connection string to apply in the identity config. So I will go to the identity folder. I will search for the app setting.production.json file. I will open this also in Notepad, and I will make the corresponding correction here as well. So we need to change in both the config files, orchestrator config as well as the app setting config. Now let us look at storage. So storage is also having the value that I provided during the installation. I don't want to use a file system storage. I want to rather use Azure blob storage. So I'll say Azure, and I will specify the connection string that I want. So here is my connection string for Azure blob. And I have specified the value for the same. I can save this config now, and my orchestrator is, the server is ready with all the config changes verified. I'll perform an IIS reset because we made some setting change. And let us now try to browse our load balance URL. First, we'll try to browse it from inside the server. Okay, so the login page has come up. And I'm able to successfully log in. Let's see what is the experience if I log in from outside. Now I'm logging in from my laptop, which is connected to the internet and in public domain. So I'm just trying to access this URL directly because I've opened the traffic for my load balancer. And it is looking good. So while this is loading, I will also show you what happened at the time of installation. So if I go to the downloads folder where the installation was done, installer, as expected, has generated a install.json file for me. And I can use that for building my second node. However, since after installation also, I made a few configuration changes, I don't want to use this file. Rather, I will show you a way using which if you make few configuration changes after installation, if you want to use generate the parameter file again, how you can do that. So I will again go to the build location, and wherever my orchestrator is installed, you will see a folder called tools. And this will have a script called generate parameter files dot ps1. I'll delete the old file, which is already present here, and I can run the command to generate the parameters again. So let me navigate first to the directory. I'm there now, and I can execute the command. So this has generated the parameter file, which I can use for building my node 2. So what I'll do is I'll copy this file, and this will become my input for building my secondary node. So I will take this, and as you can see, the orchestrator got launched from my local machine also. So node 1 is looking good. It is behind the load balancer and accessible only via the load balancer. With this, I will take the the parameter file, and I will put it on my server 2. My server 2 is ready with all prerequisites. In order to perform sanity, I will bring down my server 1 and start my installation on server 2. So as you can see here, the parameter file is already available. The command that I copied from node 2 is already available with all the necessary parameters. The input file, secondary node is equal to 1 will tell the installer that already primary node installation is done elsewhere, and it will generate this log files, and installation should be done in passive mode because the installer does not need any inputs from the user. So let me go ahead and run this command to trigger the installer. Now, while this is running, I can also view the contents of the log file using this small command to see the progress in background. So this installer will again take a few minutes to maybe a couple of minutes to execute. While this is happening, I will switch back to node 1 and I will show you, you may be interested in seeing what are the details that get captured as part of the parameter JSON file. So as you can see here, the installer will capture at the time of installation the different files that got created. But here we have manually created the parameter file. So when we ran that command, it captured all the details that it needs for building node 2 from the config details from config or database. So it has captured details like I skipped some of the features during installation. What is the certificate thumbprint? What is my connection string? What are the build locations? What is the Redis configuration? All of these details got captured, and these will be subsequently used for setting up my next set of nodes. So the orchestrator setup installer file will directly read these values and it will progress with its installation on all the subsequent nodes. So the same file can be used for building all the nodes going forward, making the installation process very simple. So another minute remaining here, and while this is getting installed, let us also ensure that our node 1 has already stopped or not. So my website is already stopped. Just to check on Redis, we can see that Redis is already having some keys created in it. So if you would have noticed at the time of installation, the count was 0, but some data has already started flowing from the orchestrator node to the HA node for data synchronization purposes. Similarly, my database should also be created on Azure now. UiPath database is already created by the installer when it installed on the node 1. Okay, so installation is completed. We did not see any kind of error of any sort. It says installation completed successfully. So we are good to check our IIS node now. IIS server running on this machine. So I've just refreshed it. And if I look at the app pools, and let me expand the node also. So this IIS was in stop state when I triggered the installation, so it is still stopped, but I can see that the application pools are already created. And also the website is already created. Let me go and change the binding. So I will change this back to the load balancer fully qualified domain name. Certificate is correct. And the binding is also modified. It will start the IIS on this server, and I can be good to perform the sanity on node 2 now. The server is already started. Try to browse this again locally from this machine first. And in interest of time, I will subsequently trigger this from the laptop also from my local machine. So I am able to get in. And things are loading fine. You can see that things are good. I can also try to just upload one package. And package got uploaded successfully. So the same should be available on my Azure Blob server. You can see just a few minutes ago, a folder got created, which has the package that I just deployed. So with this, my node 2 is up. I can as well go ahead and bring up my node 1. So my cluster will be fully ready. That brings us to the end of our installation. We also wanted to cover a scenario where, let's say we have a single node setup and we want to migrate to a multi-node based setup from a single node start, but probably we will cover that part in the subsequent sessions. Also, like someone had asked a question, if there is already an existing database and if you want to migrate just the orchestrator from one server to another, we have a tool called as we have some scripts for that, like using the inbuilt tool of platform configuration tool that can be used for running that. We can share that examples with you in the upcoming subsequent sessions. So with that, we come to the closure of the live demo of HA node installation. Both the nodes were installed. They were tested individually as well as with both nodes running together. I would like to thank all of you for giving us this opportunity to present this live installation demo. If there are any closing comments or any final questions that anybody wants to ask, we are happy to answer the same.
We're on top of the hour, but you have the option to unmute yourself and feel free to ask questions.
Shreyas, Jiten here. Will the libraries also get pushed to Azure Blob Storage during secondary installation? The default orchestrator libraries?
When you talk about the libraries, are you talking about the custom libraries or the one that come out of the box?
come out of the box, the default ones. Since we edited the storage location, the orchestrator won't be able to find it in the local storage. Like, so it will be looking in the Azure blob. So during secondary, it will get pushed to Azure blob automatically, or do we need to update manually? Sorry, upload.
No, if we are making the configuration change and the orchestrator config is pointing to Azure blob, that same setting will get applied on the secondary node automatically. And both your orchestrator nodes, node 1 and node 2 that I showed you, will point to Azure blob, a common storage location from where it will be reading the data. So you should be good there. But when you perform the installation, it's a good practice to kind of cross-validate that your configs are correct and everything is pointing to a centralized location.
Okay, thank you.
If there are no further questions, we'll call it today. Thank you, everyone. Look forward to seeing you again in the next session. You have a good day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Hi, Pawan. Shall I ask one question? To set up a multi-node orchestrator, do I need to purchase 3 license keys or a single case?
One.
Okay.
The license is stored in the database, and you want to be and using that
Okay.
queue.
Okay, it will be stored in SQL server, right?
Yeah, you would need one key.
Okay. Thank you.
No,
Uh,